Now it's a new week. Get to the point where I think I can be on camera for a minute. It's nice with that red flower in the background. I'll take you around, show you. We got some tomatoes that are starting to grow to a reasonable size. Everything's still very green, so when things begin to ripen, then you can say, okay, this is actually going to become something edible. But we'll take a quick look at it, what's up front, and then we'll go around back and then close the video for this week. So the Roma tomatoes on this plant, I see 5 of them, and I see some new flowers up there. Oh, there's a tiny one at the top, so there's 6 growing on this plant. There's a second plant in this pot with 1 in a little pea-sized one there, so maybe 2 more. Now, let me get around the pole there. On this plant, we still just have the 1 big tomato, but I see a little pea-sized one and a couple of flowers. So maybe this plant will produce more than 1. These plants are not as healthy as the ones on the side of the house. Take a quick pass at the petunias up here. We had some heavy rain this week, so a lot of the buds kind of got beaten down. They'll flower up again soon. It's interesting the way you can see the chain of the, I don't know, flowering shoots or whatever you want to call them that come up from the petunia. And that chain just keeps getting longer as the season goes on. The big hosta on the side, where the other 2 came from, is sending its shoots up in big white flowers. Looked at a picture from last year where this had all the white flowers up, and it was in the middle of August, so that's about another week. This tomato plant is interesting because it's starting to leaf out more at the top here. I don't know if the season's going to be long enough for it to turn into anything. It doesn't get direct light because it's underneath this maple tree, and that direction is south. So it's indirect light all day long. But it's getting to the point where it's happy enough that it's producing new branches and new leaves at the top. We'll see how it goes. Back here we have 1 sweet pepper growing. The other pepper plant isn't doing anything, and that one in the pot around front isn't doing anything. These little tomato plants are kind of struggling to get by. I mean, they seem to be happy, but they're not turning into much. And I suspect the season's not going to be long enough for anything to happen as far as producing tomatoes. This one on the deck, I don't know how well you can see the height, but it's almost as tall as I am at this point. Yet there have been no flowers and there is no fruit growing. So we'll see. I mean, that's been the star all along. This was the first plant to come outside, and it took off, and it's tall and healthy. It's got a fair amount of foliage. I would think it would produce fruit at some point, but it hasn't yet. No real signs either. I don't see flowers on it. Back to the corner tree. A lot of new foliage underneath, which is great. It would be nice if this just sort of works out to be something bushy. Alright, let's go down here. Getting to the point where the ground is getting covered with these nuts. I think they're off the beech tree. I'd have to confirm. But they're falling all over the place in this yard. They do every year. The squirrels like them. They take the outer covering off and bury them, and I think they dig them up during the winter. These bushes are really sorry looking, but they're surviving, so I'll leave them alone. Now this hosta plant, this was the piece that I took off the side, brought it over here early in the season back in May, and it's done so wonderful back here. But where the white flowers and the shoots are coming up on the side, I don't see any evidence of any shoot coming up on this plant. So we'll see what happens with it. The other bush is kind of sparse and struggling, but still going. This little tree, I still don't know what type that is. If only there was something to look these things up some way. Yeah, I suspect I may have to do a little Google searching and find what kind of tree that is that started growing. Okay, the plants in this space are kind of crowded. I put them in late. They were the tiny, scrawny ones from indoors that were just sort of left over after I planted everything I wanted. So this is a mix of the larger tomatoes plus the Roma, and I don't know what's going to come out of here. But there are tiny little tomatoes getting started. I remember, yeah, back here, there's a couple, there we go, down by that piece of fence. So there's 4 or 5 or 6, several flowers. So that should turn into something. It seems that when the yellow flowers turn downward, like that one is, that's a sign that a tomato is going to start growing there. Seems to be the case. Get over to these plants, and this, you see how thoroughly they've leafed out. And there's 3 plants in the 3 spaces underneath here. If you've been following, you see them. You've seen them grow, and they've just taken off. They love it over here. You can see several tomatoes started. Some are getting reasonably large, and there's several flowers and more flowers and a couple of fairly decent tomatoes growing there. Down underneath you can see a bunch of 4 there, 4 or 5 there. Kind of hopeful. You know, they've got to get large enough and then start turning red before you know you're going to end up with something edible. So we'll see how it goes here. It's interesting, this little hosta plant. Again, a piece from the side over by the garage from that big one that I transplanted over here. And it's got a shoot and 1 flower coming up, which is interesting because this was the last one I moved. That one in the back corner that's done so well doesn't have the shoots yet, but this one's got one, which is nice and a little surprising. The lilies seem to be done with their flowers for the season, so it was enjoyable while it lasted. There's a few pods up here, and I don't know if they're going to open into flowers or if they'll just die back. I don't know. We'll see. Now we're back around to the beginning, and we'll close off with a view of the red flowers.